All right, Adam. Well, let's recap the first loss of the season at USC. The Buffs go out to Los Angeles, lose 31-20, and get beat up in the game. Not only lose it, but boy, you lose Jace Frankie. Mike McIntyre confirms today torn ACL is out for the year, which means he's out for his career. Unfortunately, Laviska Shenault, the toe injury. We don't know how severe that is at this point. Jay McIntyre, a concussion. Trayvon McMillan, a leg contusion. So they got beat up in this game.
It was a rough game. It felt like Clancy Pendergast kind of created the blueprint to try to stop this offense, limiting to Colorado under 300 yards. They did have that bye week. So as Mike McIntyre says, other schools copy what other teams do in the areas you struggle. So I would imagine Washington's going to try to duplicate what USC did from a scheme standpoint. Yeah, it was a rough Saturday overall for Colorado. I guess the one bright side is you got to see Jalen Jackson catch back-to-back passes, and just a great story for him. Misses his entire senior season in high school, both to a torn ACL, then has that severe leg injury here last year. So that was maybe the one positive you took from that game. Jalen Jackson says he's 95% back. He's this kid that ran a sub 10.6 100-meter dash in high school, and
That's pretty good.
I mean, even at 95%, he says he's the fastest player on the team. So it'd be good to see him get thrown in the mix a little bit more. Obviously, Jay McIntyre has the experience there, but I think Jalen Jackson could be a player for this team.
Yeah, especially with J Mac going through concussion protocol, you got to be careful with that. Maybe he is unable to go, and somebody like Jalen can step in and play. I thought he looked good. He caught a couple passes, was targeted 3 or 4 times. I thought he looked pretty good.
Yeah. Another thing from that game that I was curious about when we met with McIntyre today was get a few of his takes on Steven Montez's performance. He had only had 38 incompletions through 5 games, an average of 7 per, and he had 21 against USC. Obviously, as McIntyre pointed out, there were a lot of factors in there. A couple times receivers ran the wrong routes, and USC was 16 tackles for a loss, 4 sacks. It's hard to do your job as a quarterback in that situation. I know at the Nebraska game he got sacked 7 times, but he still played pretty well. You can't expect your quarterback to be under that much fire.
Yeah, and this is unofficial, but I tracked 4 drops for the night, which would have been a season high, so that doesn't help as well. One of those drops being the pass that hits off Laviska's hand that gets picked off for the pick 6, and kind of a tough drop. It was a tough play, but Montez not at his best. You can't expect really anybody to play at such a high level for 12 games. He had an off game. He's got to bounce back. And you talk about the blueprint defensively. One thing about that blueprint is you got to have players that can actually follow the blueprint. Well, this next opponent does, Washington. We'll get more into that later on this week, but it kind of spells. It could be a bad recipe for this week that Washington's got the players to do the same thing.
Yeah, as Steven Montez said after the game, they kind of had us figured out with the short to intermediate stuff. So this is a big week for Darren Cheverini and Clayton Adams, the co-offense coordinator as well, to tweak some things based off that. Part of it is USC just has really good athletes defensively, right?
Yeah.
But Washington is as well. So this is a true test for this offensive staff this week.
Yeah, I think Steven might have to throw the ball downfield a bit better than he has been. And 4 of 16 on passes, 10 yards beyond the line of scrimmage or more against USC. He's got to get better at that. So,
well, he has to have more time too, right, in the pocket for those routes to develop. So, yeah.
So going back to that game, some injuries obviously. Let's talk about Laviska because we saw him today walk by us. I didn't practice as wearing the boot and doesn't look good. If he can't play, how much do you think that impacts this team going forward?
I mean, a lot. Steven Montez got defensive when that was brought up in the post-game press conference, but there's only one Laviska Shenault in college football, and he's pretty dynamic. I mean, there's a reason game day and all these people are doing features on the kid. He has an off game, I guess you could call it, aside from the 49-yard run. He still had 121 yards of offense and was knocked out of the game. Your playbook shrinks quite a bit. I mean, you can do some of the Wildcat stuff with Trayvon McMillan, but the way it's different. So it's a big deal. Mike McIntyre has been really open about injuries all year, even in camp and throughout the season. But if I'm him, this is one week where I'm not really going to comment on Laviska Shenault's situation, especially if he is going to play, because you don't really want Washington knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah, it was actually the first time I've ever seen Steven get defensive like that on a question and be kind of surly towards a reporter. It kind of took me aback. It wasn't me that asked it, but it really surprised me when he reacted that way. But I thought that it was telling that he got defensive, but I think it was also telling that he believes in a lot of the other guys. I mean, he knows Tony Brown's there. He knows K.D. Nixon is there. He knows that maybe Juwan Winfrey at some point comes back. He knows Jalen Jackson's there. Kayvon Ento. I think that in some ways that said that he feels confident with the guys around him.
Yeah, if you're a Colorado fan, that's exactly how you want Steven Montez to respond, is to get defensive and defend the other playmakers on offense. Kind of shows, again, to this team's unity there. And you heard that it was, players were upset, but it wasn't, you heard from quite a few players that they're not expecting, it was different than it would have been in the locker room after, a loss in 2017.
Yeah, and even, Drew Lewis mentioned after the game, he said, look, we're down, but I think last year we would have hung our heads and it would have carried over. This year's group, I don't think it'll carry over. So we'll find out this week. Yeah,
they've battled through adversity and come back in some games. Now we'll see how they actually handle adversity. And going out to Seattle being a huge underdog, 17 points it opened up. Yeah. So no one's really – it's, again, Colorado's fully back into the underdog role again.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is this is a tough one because it may not carry over and you may bounce back pretty well, but you still might lose this game because Washington's such a good team. So we'll see how it goes. And we'll talk more about that Washington game later on this week. But it's a tough task.
Before the season, if you said this team would be 5-2 coming home to play Oregon State, I think 90% of Colorado fans would have taken that. Right. So
the other 10 are a little irrational, I think.
But, yeah, I mean – who knows? This team can compete out there. Yeah, we'll get into that later in the week. But, again, the season is not lost because they lost to USC.
Sounds good. Well, we'll be back later on this week to preview the game against Washington.